We begin the study of world history with the study of prehistory. But before we do that, we have to answer this essential question. What is knowable? Because, right, the whole deal with this prehistory thing is that it took place prior to any kind of formal written language. Now, there was definitely, we have evidence to suggest that there was plenty of spoken language, but people weren't writing things down yet. They didn't have pencils or pens or even clay tablets and styluses, right? We're talking about a period that spans tens of thousands of years. But how do we know? We weren't there. How do we know what happened? Well, elsewhere on Khan Academy, in the U.S. history curriculum, you'll see a video series by Kim Kutz called The Historian's Toolkit. And one of those is about how to think like a historian. And what Kim does is she lays out that a historian is three things. A historian is a storyteller, a scientist, and a lawyer. These are scales of justice here. I'd like to add an additional role to that, and that is the role of detective. That's your little magnifying lens right there. So the question is, how do modern historians know what happened before history, before things were written down? Well, we have a bunch of different ways, and it all stems from this detective scientist way of thinking. This is what the entire discipline of anthropology is all about. And if you've never heard that word, anthropology, which means the study of human beings. So anthropos is Greek for humans, and logos, or logi in this case, is a science, is a way of understanding the world. And an anthropologist can be someone like an archaeologist, and arche here is a word that means old. Archaeology is the study of old stuff, if you want to be imprecise about it. And if you want to be slightly more precise about it, it's the study of old human stuff. And there are also paleontologists. The term paleo, meaning ancient, you might recognize from a diet trend that's going around these days. But I actually want you to focus on not just pale, which means ancient or old in Greek, but also ontology, which is the study of how stuff came to be, or the science of being. So paleontologists study non-human things. And into that mix, you can throw any other number of scientific or humanities disciplines, right? Like history, art, geology, biology, and chemistry, just to name a few. So those are some of the people that can determine how stuff is knowable. But I still haven't answered the question, how is the ancient pre-written past knowable? So, first of all, one of the first things you do, you're trying to figure out something about the past, you have to dig it out of the earth. So we literally find physical evidence for stuff in the past. That's the key, physical evidence. This is where being a detective comes in. Here's our detective with her badge. You want to pin a crime on a suspect, you have to find some physical evidence. So when archaeologists and paleontologists want to find something out about the past, they have to literally excavate it from the earth. So let's say you and I are archaeologists, and we're on a dig in Tanzania, let's say, and you and I uncover this humanoid skull. And I run some tests on it, and I say, this skull is 60,000 years old. How do I know that? I mean, this person wasn't buried with a calendar, let's say. If they were, that would make our jobs very easy. No, there are specialized techniques that enable us to figure out, as researchers, as scientists, as people attempting to make sense of history, how old something is. Now, one of those ways is called carbon dating. All organic life has within it a little bit of a radioactive isotope or variant of carbon called carbon-14. And all radioactive things slowly decay. That's what being radioactive means. And so over time, this unstable isotope, carbon-14, becomes this more stable isotope, carbon-12. And we can judge up to about 40,000 years how old something is, depending on the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-14 within it. But if it's older than 40,000 years, we can't use carbon dating. So if I said this skull is 60,000 years old, I couldn't have used carbon dating. But I could have used stratigraphic dating. What is that? So stratigraphy is the study of layers. In this case, layers of rock. right? Because if you dig a hole straight through the earth, you're gonna find a bunch of different layers of rock and dirt and sediment and sand and clay, and all of those date to different periods and have different things in them. So if I find, a skull down here, I know that it's probably going to be older than a skull found up here. And I can use something called potassium-argon dating to figure out how old something is there. So even if we've got this fossilized skull that is, no longer has any organic material within it, has basically turned into a mineral, and can't tell us with carbon dating how old it is, I can still judge the age of the rocks around it using potassium-argon dating. So you can date the organic material, like the bones, or if there's any hair or any of that remaining. You can date the rocks around it. You can also see, let's say this skull was buried with a necklace. Let's say it was like a shark's tooth. Well, that tells us a lot too. This is an artifact. This is evidence of human culture. There's so much that we can tell about a society just from the fact that, this human specimen that we found was buried with a shark tooth necklace. Number one, means that somebody in that culture killed a shark or found a shark dead, but was somehow connected to the sea. Secondly, they figured out a way to string this tooth onto a piece of fabric or leather or whatever it was. Even if tens of thousands of years have elapsed, and all of this has rotted away, except for a tiny little fragment, we can still make a guess from that fragment and say, whatever culture this human being was from, they had this technology. If it was a piece of leather wrapped around a shark's tooth, we can say there's pretty good evidence to suggest that these people raised cattle and fished, and occasionally fought or encountered and maybe even won against sharks. Now, this thing with the skull and the shark tooth necklace, it's all made up for examples, but all sorts of things like this are happening all the time within history. That's part of what makes it so fascinating, is that we are always looking for evidence to support our ideas about how the past was. And so it's not impossible to know. You can use the physical characteristics of the planet to your aid in determining how old something is and what a culture was like. It just takes a little bit of science, know-how, and thinking like a detective. You can learn anything. David out.